It's a beautiful Tuesday morning in the city of Lagos, southwest Nigeria. My name is Damola Ogunshakin. Happy Valentine's to all our viewers out there. Now let's move straight to the front pages of the dailies. I'm starting with Vanguard. Vanguard is leading with El-Rufai. I no longer believe in leadership quality around Buhari, alleges Buhari's cabal eyeing interim government. El-Rufai denying Buhari to run away from APC's monumental failure that's coming from MBF. They are smelling defeat, resulting to ING that's coming from PDP leader. APC government unraveling and imploding that's coming from Kachuku. Presidency APC keep mum. You can see that story on page 5. We have a photo story showing that the Minister of Police Affairs, Mohammed, and Cross River Governor, Senator Ben Ayade, also President Muhammad Buhari, and Inspector General of Police, Usman Alkali, during the commissioning of police operational assets, vehicles, and crowd control anti riot equipment at the force headquarters, Abuja, yesterday. Now, moving on page 8, grazing reserves, lands belong to God, not you, Sultan tells governors. Manufacturers spent 649 billion naira on raw materials imports. You can see that story on page 9. On page 31, sports, on the 20 AFCON, Eagles storm Egypt for 8th title. Lagos orders inquest into death of Christian school pupil. And you can see that story on page 6. Valentine's Day, share love, not HIV. Naka boss charges Nigerians. You can see the stories on pages 6, 22, and 31. Now on page 12, Atiku cancels Rivers presidential campaign rally over face-off with Wike. Polls, federal government shut polytechnics. More anti-graft CSOs join Bauer must go protest. You can see that on page 13. Stories above on page 12. Rivers purchase of Kidney Island, stakes in OML 11 reversible, court tells SPDC. Lastly, on the front page of Vanguard newspaper, banks reject old naira notes as queues persist at ATMs. Buhari, Emefiele meet again in Aso Rock. POS operators lament impact of cash crunch. And that's all on Vanguard. Now let's move straight to The Guardian. The Guardian newspaper is leading with, again, Buhari meets Emefiele, keeps warm on Naira swap. CBN embrace e-Naira internet banking as alternatives to cash. Epes Bank loses 15 billion naira to Ordin, explains how to exchange old naira notes. BDC's profits from naira scarcity, lower exchange rate for cash transaction. Ipazu worried about cash scarcity on traders in Abia, commissioner says. A Niger governor orders police to arrest anyone rejecting old notes. You can see that story on page 6. CSO's march for removal of Bauer as EFCC chair. You can see that on page 4. Now, stories above. Police claim Odudua agitators are amassing weapons to disrupt polls. Lastly, on the Guardian newspaper, Valentine's Day, Google Trends showed Nigeria leads in search for love in 2023. And you can see that story on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. Now let's move to The Nation. The Nation this morning is also leading with Naira crisis has brought anger, says Sultan. Monarch asks president to take action. Banks reject old notes, shut out customers. You can see that story on page 4. Lagos begins a test run of blue light rail. DSS quizzes and releases Fani Kayode. You can see that on page 6. Stories above. Why polls won't hold in 240 units by INEC. You can see that story on pages 2 and 3. And the Punch newspaper this morning is also leading with Naira deadline. Banks, fuel stations reject old notes, ignore Supreme Court order. Buhari, Emefiele meet again as old Naira deposits hit over 2 trillion Naira. POS operators, depositors panic, flood banking halls with old currencies. Fuel marketers blame banks, courts turn back lawyers with expired money. You can see these stories on pages 2 and 18. And we also have the photo stories showing Buhari as he launches security equipment, warns police against politics. You can see that on page 5. AK-47 bearing pastor arrested. A policeman faces probe. Church apologizes. You can see that on page 5. Breach. Data Bureau probes other than 10 companies. You can see that on page 31. Stories above. I regret raising cool alarm. That's coming from Fani Kayode after DSS grilling. Also, share love on Valentine's Day, not HIV. Naka is saying that. Lastly, on the Punch newspaper, Atiku Rivers rally cancelled to prevent deaths. That's coming from PDP. You can see that on page 8 of the Punch newspaper. And that's all we have on the front pages of the dailies this morning. Join us after the break as we analyze the stories with our guests. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Today in the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Damnola Ogunshaki. Joining us this morning is Mr. Dayo Akintobi. He's the publisher of Ilupeju Today, Lekki Today, and Ikeja GRA Today. Good morning, Mr. Dayo.
Good morning, Damilola. Happy Valentine's Day to you, to everyone at Vanguard, and to all our viewers as well.
Yes, thank you. And let's move straight to what the papers are saying this morning. Now, Governor Nasir El-Rufai of Kaduna State yesterday caused a stir, in the polity ahead of next week presidential poll, saying he no longer believed in the quality of leadership around President Muhammadu Buhari. He claimed that presidency cabal was working towards an interim national government. That's the ING. What do you think about this?
Essentially, Governor El-Rufai was speaking essentially to President Buhari. He's just quoting his words diplomatically by saying, "Oh, I don't believe in the people around him." If you don't believe in the decisions of the people around him, it means you don't believe in the decisions he's making himself, which is relatively surprising because El-Rufai has been one of the strong acolytes and supporters and collaborators of President Buhari for the last 7 years. So, but now that he has roped in with Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu and is supporting the APC candidate's ambition, it lends credence to the fact that there seems to be a schism between the top echelon of the APC, or at least the Aso Rock Villa, and the APC presidential candidate. Because look at El-Rufai, who seems to be caught in the middle, but if you parse his words very carefully, essentially what he's doing is passing a vote of no confidence in President Buhari and the administration. And you would wonder that he is an APC stalwart himself. To be casting those kind of missiles at his party leadership, at the president, at the administration, it's befuddling to contemplate because it tells you that all is not well in the ruling party. It has to be that there is some truth to this notion of the fact that perhaps the upper echelons in the APC are not in support of their presidential candidate. For somebody as high up in the APC as El-Rufai to be saying that the people around the president doesn't have confidence in their decisions anymore, and that it won't surprise him if there's an agenda to try and scuttle the ambition of their party flag bearer. When he first started talking about this thing, he said this naira policy, this naira redesign policy, this limits on cash, even the fuel scarcity. He said it brazenly that they were all tactics to cause disaffection in the polity against the ruling party so as to truncate the presidential ambition of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Now, I know, of course, he's doing his best to support his candidate, but these missiles he's throwing are so profound and heavy that they risk imploding the entire APC itself. So I ask myself, is he that besotted with Asiwaju Tinubu, or is he that beholden to him that he will go to the extent of poking his finger in the eyes of his own party and his own leader? It befuddles my mind. And I just have to conclude that all is not well in the ruling party. And it is true that there are factions, and those factions have different agendas, and they're all pulling against each other.
Yeah. He said that the leaders around President Muhammadu Buhari sorted to ING after failing to make the governor of CBN and also Senate president to succeed Buhari. And since after the primaries and all as well, of course Tinubu actually succeeded. Said so. This is why they resorted to ING. What do you think about
If you look at the way Lawan emerged and the way Emefiele tried to emerge, it was rather untoward. Their candidacies were never, Lawan came in like 2 days before the primary. We just all of a sudden heard that a dark horse was coming from somewhere and that he was backed by some powerful interest, which some people read that to mean President Buhari. Emefiele himself never openly declared, but he said some people bought form for him. We saw a lot of branded vehicles with his photo on it saying he was running for president. And there was a large outcry then that how can a sitting CBN governor who is independent be doing politics and be wanting to run for president while in office without resigning? So if Lawan and Emefiele were the preferred candidates of certain powers within the APC and their candidacies didn't see the light of day, and of course then somebody else emerged, under normal circumstances, you would expect all the losers to be gracious in defeat and rally together around to support their party's candidate. That's the whole idea of a party, is that it's people of common vision, common values, common aspirations who come together to form a party. But remember that the APC came out of the marriage of strange bedfellows. There was the ACN, there was the CPC, there was the NPP, and there was New PDP. Four people with divergent ideologies, different beliefs, different objectives came together to form this amalgamation. So right from the beginning, the foundation may have already been skewed in such a way that their objectives couldn't align. So now you see them reverting to their original constituent unit. So the CPC bloc within the APC is now pushing its own agenda. The ACN is pushing the Ashiwaju agenda. The AMPP, who knows what they're doing? The New PDP, we don't even know where they are. So when there's talk about because Emefiele and Lawan didn't emerge, maybe that's what's pushing some people to now say, well, let's try and scuttle these elections and do an ING. That notion of an ING is not going to fly because, first of all, it has no constitutional backing. The military did it and got away with it because they rule with fiat. They rule by decree. So they could have said when the Babangida government came out and they put Shoneko in to run this interim national government for a while, military could do that because military rules by diktat. But in a democratic setting that is undergirded by a constitution, there is no constitutionality or any provision for an ING within the structure by which we are operating today. So I don't see how. The only way an ING can come into existence today is if we suspend the constitution and institute martial law, which is not going to happen because the military has already said we are not partisan, we are neutral, we are not political, we are not participating in this process. Ours is to keep the peace, monitor the territorial integrity of the country, and make sure all the citizens are safe. So I don't see how an ING can come. No matter what happens, this democratic process will play out. Elections will hold. I'm not saying they will hold on the day they are scheduled to hold, but they will hold. We will vote, and somebody will win. One of the four people will win and will be sworn in and will carry on with our democracy. That's the ideal, and that's the prayer of all Nigerians that it should work like that. So let's not even go anywhere near the notion of an ING because it would essentially destabilize and scatter what we have built for the last 24 years.
But won't this division that's currently going on in APC, won't it affect the election? Because PDP is also going through their own internal crisis, and now we are seeing that APC is also going through the same thing, with El-Rufai coming out to say this, and some governors, coming out to say, El-Rufai is just fighting for himself and not for the minds of APC.
Well, I don't see it having an impact on the elections at large, but it'll have an impact on the individual parties. It will detract away from the attractability of their candidates. So it behooves all the parties to sort out their internal crises and all the centripetal forces that are pulling them in all kinds of directions. It behooves them to put their houses in order in the next 11 days before the election. Otherwise, it will take away from their attractability. It won't affect the elections generally. PDP has problems too, yes. I don't know if you heard that Governor Wike, Atiku has cancelled his Rivers campaign completely because he says he can't guarantee the safety, that the way Wike has set Rivers up now, if he goes to campaign, their violence will break out. For the last 23 years, no time has PDP not campaigned in Rivers? Rivers has been a stronghold of the PDP. For their presidential candidate to say he is cancelling his campaign there, it sends a very strong message that that house is not in order. And then APC also has this internal wrangling. So what does that do? I think it makes all the other parties look attractive, because a person like me will look and say APC has issues, PDP has issues. Well, Labour seems to be relatively calm and peaceful. NNPP seems to be relative. Why don't I take a look at them as an option as opposed to these people? Because if you can't organize the affairs of your party peacefully, cohesively, and progressively, how do you want to run the country for all of us to now be at peace and developing and prospering? So to me, the parties are hurting themselves. They're cutting off their noses to spite their faces, and it is them that will pay the price. It won't surprise me if after this election, some of these parties don't they cease to exist completely, because the internal forces that are pulling them apart are just too strong and formidable for the party itself to survive as a structure.
Okay, ahead of this election, the Minister of Education, Malam Adamu, he has ordered closure of all polytechnics and allied institutions in the country. I hear yes, of course. And but the question is, should the polytechnics and other universities, should it really be shut? I mean, we have all the other countries where when they do the elections, this does not affect anything, even work days.
In more developed democracies, on election day, it's not like anybody skips work or anybody stays at home or there's no movement. All the things that we put in place here in the very developed democracies, they've gone past those stages. In America, on election day, people still go to work. They just take their lunch break for 5-10 minutes, go and cast their ballots and come back. But because we are still a developing democracy where there's still allegations of ballot snatching, there's pockets of violence, there's voter intimidation, there's all kinds of things. So these measures have had to be put in place to ensure a smooth running election process. Now, for the government to have taken the unprecedented step of closing universities and polytechnics and telling them to go home from this, I think the 22nd, till after the governorship election in mid-March, it means that the government has a clear and conscious fear of violence. Although some people are saying, oh, the reason they are doing it is so that the students can go back home to where they registered. There are no likelihood many of the students registered at home where they live, and if they are on campus, they won't be able to move that day to get to where they registered. So that the idea of sending them home is to allow them to be able to vote. But the truth be told is it's a worry about security, because first of all, most universities are populated by young people who can easily be recruited, especially in this age where there's no cash, there's no money, everybody is desperate. So a politician can easily come to a place where the youth are gathered and take advantage of them with a little bit of money, either buy their votes or use them to foment violence or use them to scatter certain polling units. So rather than have that concentration of youthful exuberance in one place, let's diffuse them across the country in their various homes where they can do no harm individually. But the official reason, of course, is because there's a real worry about the fact that there could be a breakout of violence. So they want to keep our students safe by having them at home under the care of their parents and guardians.
All right, talking about the old naira notes, in spite of the Supreme Court orders, some banks have stopped collecting the old naira notes since yesterday. In short, we have vendors since on Friday they stopped collecting the old naira note, despite the orders of the Supreme Court. What do you think about this and the action?
That's purely the CBN's fault, because the CBN has not come out and articulated a policy ever since that Supreme Court decision. CBN has not commented on it, even though the CBN was not joined in the suit, right? CBN was not a part of the suit. It was the federal government, the state governments taking the federal government to the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court issued a directive, said, let us maintain status quo. That directive affects everybody, including the CBN, including you, me, the banks, everybody. So even though the president was whom the Supreme Court addressed its answer to, that decision affects everybody in the country. And I think that President Buhari should have called the CBN governor and said, go ahead and enforce the Supreme Court decision. So call your banks. Remember, CBN is the regulator, is the police of all the banks. And if the CBN had stood up and told the banks and told the Nigerian public that we are respecting the Supreme Court order, and as a result, your old notes are good until Wednesday the 15th, when the Supreme Court hears the case and makes a decision, your notes are good. Any bank found not honoring your notes to collect them will be sanctioned. Any trader or business found not to be accepting the old notes till the 15th will be sanctioned. If you had made a forceful statement like that to let people know we're not playing, we believe in due process, we are a law-abiding institution, and we will stand by what the courts have said. But the CBN has been mum, very quiet. Now, not just not saying anything, but they've not even put the facilities in place for us to be able to get cash. They don't have any new notes left. They didn't print enough. They've distributed what they have. There's no more new notes for them to give us. Okay, yeah, recirculate the old ones that we have turned back into you. They're saying they started destroying them, so they don't have old notes to give us back. So where does that leave us? It leaves the common man without money to feed. Somebody who's supposed to work for me this morning called me and said, I can't come to work, I have no cash, and the transporters are not taking transfers, they don't have POS, so I can't enter that, I can't get to work this morning, I simply have no cash. So people's cupboards are starting to get empty because market people, they're not accepting old notes anymore. They are not accepting transfers. Meanwhile, we have no new notes to spend. So we are in a very bad situation. And what's more worrisome is the election is 10, 11 days away. How can election hold at a time when the overwhelming majority of the country is going through dire straits? And somebody tells me there's no agenda behind this. How is that possible that at a time when the electorate needs to be docile and pliable and complacent and happy so that they can go out and cast their votes willingly and happily, looking forward to a greater tomorrow, how come that is the time that the greatest hardship is being visited upon the populace? It does not make sense. Whatever has brought this about, whether it's a deliberate agenda, whether it's a poor implementation of a good policy, whatever may have brought it about, it definitely is the worst possible policy that has ever been visited upon the Nigerian people, especially to do with the timing and how it has played out. It's not working.
All right. Lastly, let's quickly look at this because our time is fast spent. The Sultan of Sokoto, he has charged the state governors to come up with concrete solutions to the farmers' elders clash by creating by way of creating grazing reserves rather than grandstanding that they do not have any land to seed for the project. You know, he went on to say the land they belong to God and not to the governors.
Yes, but unfortunately, God won't come down from heaven to come and administer himself. He administers through people. So at this point in time, God has appointed the governors to hold land in trust for the people. So at the end of the day, it's still the governors. Even let's call them God's proxies. They are the proxies for God's work in terms of land. So I think the Sultan was frustrated because I was expressing frustration because the governors have more or less been reluctant to cede land to farmers, to herders, for this grazing thing, because all along the notion has been that these free-ranging cattle who destroy farmland so that they can eat and they can graze is not a good thing. They are destroying the hard work of other people so that the herders themselves can do their business. But you're stopping other people from doing their business in the process of your doing business. It's not right. Everybody's agreed on that. So the solution seems to be, let us earmark land. Let's fence it around. Let's put the cattle in there. That way, they're not going to go and destroy innocent farmers' crops. Meanwhile, they still can feed, they can graze, they can this, they can that. So, but to do that, land is required. Who holds the land? The governors of each state. So they came up with this national livestock program where it required states to allocate grazing lands. But the governors have said, you are a business. We're not just going to give you free land and let you. Why? We don't give farmers free land. We don't give other people free land. Why should we? Why are you such a protected and special species? What makes you so special that you merit that kind of an advantage over other business people? The kind of thing we don't do for every other business. Why should we do it for you? So there's that issue. Where does the land come from? They're saying, buy your own land, lease your own land, fence it. It's a cost of doing business. That's part of your capital expenditure. That's part of your startup cost. Buy your land. Go to private landowners who own acres and acres, buy your land, fence it, put your cattle there, and everybody's at peace. Why should you be expecting the government to give you a largesse that every other person does not get? So the governors are reluctant to provide that land. So I think what the Sultan was in a roundabout way saying was that now that we have got to this pass where we are at a checkmate stage now, these people need land, government has land, let's find a way to resolve these issues so that all these farmer herder clashes can stop, and that you should have the fear of God. So I think it was lobbying in a way that the governors should please soften their approach and try and find a middle ground to work out this issue.
All right, Mr. Dayo, let's just end this on a lighter note with Mr. and Mrs. And the first person speaking today is Mr. And of course, they are in their love position. Mr. says, Happy Valentine, darling. Mrs. replied, Same to you, Oni. In this period of cashlessness, may the ATM dispense love and the bank staff attend to you with the spirit of Valentine. Go and bring back love in mint condition.
Okay, so love for this Valentine is new notes in mint condition. Yes, that's the best kind of love.
That is actually the best gift now. So forget all the teddies and all that. Just bring the cash.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's no cash outside.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer, for joining us this morning.
Pleasure is all mine. Happy Valentine Day, everybody.
Yes, and you too. And that's all we have for you on Today in the News. Do well to like and follow us on all our social media platforms shown on your screen. On Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Our WhatsApp number is also displayed on your screen. My name is Damola Okunshakin. Happy Valentine's Day to our viewers.